Fantastic. Thank you very much. Welcome to this virtual Cabinet panel on the environment meeting that is being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio, video, and online. There is also the opportunity for the public and press to listen to and view proceedings. We also have contributors from various organisations with us here to provide feedback. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take a roll call to confirm that the required members, officers and participants can be heard. Over to you, Robert.
Good evening, everyone. So when your name is called, please indicate your attendance to confirm the required members, officers and registered speakers are present and can hear and be heard. So for members, obviously Councillor Amy Allen, that's present. Councillor Mick Debenham.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Tina Barthwa.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Graziano.
Joe's having difficulties connecting. So I don't know whether, James, can you ping him the link to his private email? Or is that not allowed? He can't, he's got problems with his NHCC laptop.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and get in touch with him. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Strong.
No problem. So Councillor Dominic Griffiths. No. Okay. Councillor Bryony May.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Caroline McDonnell.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Claire Strong.
You've already heard from me.
Oh, sorry, Claire. My apologies. And then in attendance, we have Councillor Ian Albert.
Yep. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you. And then officers, we have Georgina Chapman.
Present.
Thank you. Ellie Hollingsworth.
Present.
Thank you. Sean Hoare.
Present.
Thank you very much. And then public, we have Dear Linda.
Present.
Thank you. We have Mike Clark. Nope. Chris Jones.
Mike Clark's here.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Mike. And just say that again, Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Diane Ketcher. Nope. Okay. Margaret Killingbeck. James Rhodes.
Yes, here. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Julia Sananda.
Here.
Thank you. And finally, John Webb.
Present.
Thank you very much. Back to you. I will hand back to the chair now. Sorry, that's what I meant to say.
Thank you, Robert. Just quickly, I think one of our members of the public, I think it's actually Marguerite, not Margaret, but I'm sure she'll correct us or not when she gets here. Apologies for absence. So we've received apologies from Councillor Lisa Nash. As we can see, Councillor Caroline McDonnell, having given due notice, she will be substituting for Councillor Nash. Are there any further apologies? I didn't hear Councillor Griffiths. I'm assuming he's running late or having some technical issues. Bryony, do you know? Or Caroline?
No, I don't know. I'll message him and see what his circumstances are at the moment.
Super. Thank you, Bryony. Okay, well, in that case, I'm just going to move on to the next bit, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm going to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the panel held on the 9th of October 2024. Can I have a seconder? This is normally when Mick Debenham waves at me.
Yeah, I was clicking the wrong button. Yes, I'd love to second them. Thank you.
We were all having technical issues tonight. And if that's approved, I shall move on to, because we don't need to vote unless someone's got a query, and I think that seems to be all good. So I'm going to take that as done. So I'm going to move on to my chair's announcements. In accordance with council I'll start that again. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recordings will be available on both the council's YouTube page as well as the council's ModGov site. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Members are reminded that this council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that as these are emergencies, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet, and that is why none of these panels are ever done in person, because we think about the emissions. I've got notification of other business. I have not been notified of any other business. And I don't think there's any last minute any other business either. And in that case, Councillor Joe Graziano, welcome. Good to have you here. Moving on to item 5, which is the work programme and the action tracker, and that is over to Georgina Chapman to present.
Thank you. So the information note highlights the topic for this meeting. So it says that we're going to receive a presentation on flooding in North Hertfordshire, particularly in the kind of Hitchin-Walsworth area, from the Operations Manager for Flood Risk and Adaptation at County Council. And I think Sian is also going to touch briefly on the adaptation work that's happening through the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. And then from North Herts Council's end, we're going to provide an update on the new risk that was added to the council's corporate risk register around climate change adaptation. Just by way of update in terms of climate work that's been going on, so some of the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership work, the second round of Solar Together has closed now, and across Hertfordshire as of December 2024, there were 1,665 solar PV installations through that scheme across Hertfordshire. A third round has been agreed for the Solar Together scheme. So that again is just a reminder for anyone that's new. That's a group buying scheme where you can register your interest in solar panels. There's no obligation to proceed once you've registered your interest, but you will get an offer made to you for a system, hopefully at a kind of below market price because of the group buying potential for savings. So yeah, the third round for that has been agreed, and it will be launching shortly, and we'll provide more information on that as we have it. Just to note on Solar Together, a query was raised at the previous panel meeting about the ability to use stored power during blackouts. So just to update on that, we contacted iChooser, and they said that you can, if you want to, if you're a customer of Solar Together, ask your installer, get back in contact with your installer and ask to have an emergency power supply attached to your system, an EPS, which would allow for use of stored power during a blackout. And it won't matter what kind of inverter you have as to whether or not you can have that EPS installed, because I know there was a bit of confusion around that at the last discussion on this. If people want to talk through that more, they're very welcome to get in contact with iChooser, who will talk you through the process. But you must have a battery storage system in order to be able to have this emergency power supply attached. So that's the update on that. That was our first and only action so far on the new action tracker. So that has been reflected on the action tracker, and we've also updated the FAQs on the Solar Together webpage to reflect this as well. Moving on to the work on the local nature recovery strategy. So these are the spatial strategies, which are agreeing priorities for nature recovery as well. So the first draft of that is ready, and it's being shared with district councils. It was County Council that was leading on this work. So they're now working with district councils to get feedback on the first draft. The first draft of the web platform is also finished, and that's going through refinement to make it easy to use for everyone and accessible. And I think user testing is beginning on that soon. And there will be, I think, further engagement opportunities, which should be listed on the Hertfordshire Nature Recovery Partnership website. The next update we have is that North Herts Council have launched our ECO, which is Energy Company Obligation Flex scheme. So we launched that in the week commencing the 13th of January, and the point of that is to kind of make it easier for lower income households and certain vulnerable households to get their homes made more energy efficient. And we're working with the National Energy Foundation to do that. So we've got a criteria published on our website. There's a flow chart which kind of should show you whether or not you're eligible. There's various routes for eligibility, but a household earning under 31k per year is one, and another is if you're deemed to be vulnerable or you have a particular range of health conditions as confirmed by your GP. So I will put the link for that flow chart on criteria in the chat, and if you can spread the word to anybody that you think might be eligible, that would be really helpful. The next update is about the public sector decarbonisation scheme. So this is an update to say that the council submitted an application for the 4th round of public sector decarbonisation scheme following our successful bid for funding in the previous round. And so this application is for funding to decarbonise the district council offices, Hitchin Town Hall and North Herts Museum. If we're successful, we would expect to hear back by May 2025. So we will keep you posted on that as well. And then lastly, a reminder to sign up to our Climate Hive. I'll pop the link for this in the chat as well. So this is the engagement hub that we use to update on climate change and sustainability. We put various updates on there, and before Christmas we ran a Q&A with Councillor Allen as executive member for recycling and waste management. We've got lots of questions about waste and recycling. So if you sent in a question, head over there to see the answers, because we've posted the answers on that page. So do subscribe to that, and I will pop the link in the chat. Yeah, and just on the action plan, just to say that, as said before, we've completed our action to look into the Solar Together issue about using the power in the blackouts. There are no other actions currently on the action tracker because this is our new tracker. But any actions that people think should go onto the tracker, let me know tonight or pop it in the chat and we can have a look at that. Yeah, thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Georgina. The Q&A regarding recycling and waste, I really enjoyed working through that because there were some pretty in-depth questions, and we managed to go off and do lots of investigating for things that were maybe slightly outside of what we would normally do, or and then, you know, lots of multiples. We managed to condense into a better answer all round. It was an opportunity to really go into detail with information upon, you know, on these questions that people had asked. So it was really, really good. Right, fantastic. Thank you. Brilliant as always. Right, do we have any questions? So I am doing this on my phone, so I've got a smaller screen to work with. Oh, thank you for the link to the EcoFlex criteria in the chat. If anyone wants to take a look at that, you're welcome to. Dear Linda, I see you got your hand up.
Good evening, everybody. In reply about the solar panels and being able to use the stored power, I believe I probably was the person that brought the query. My point was, it says, providing you have batteries. I do have batteries. And when they, in fact, I've got 3 batteries in the garage. When I asked about using power, all they could do is what was provided in the answer that you sent is effectively translates as putting a single plug in the garage straight out of those batteries. Well, what good is it to have a single plug when I want to run the fridge, the freezer, the computer, or whatever it is, out of the power in 3 batteries that I've got in the garage? They could only provide it from the inverter that was sold with the system, only 1 power socket in the garage. It doesn't matter how many batteries you have, you get 1 out of the inverter. And that is really, that's my point. It is no good. So it says that you can't run the house. Yes, you can. In other parts of the world, and even in this country, you can have an intelligent enough inverter selected and provided with your solar panels that allow you to run the whole house without feeding power to the grid. So I know it can be done. I know my son's house has got that type of inverter. And when there was a power failure, his house kept going. So it can be done. I'm not accepting a silly answer from the people that provided
no.
this for me.
Dear Linda, please don't speak to my officers like that. I'll not accept that kind of behaviour. Joe, I see you've got your hand up and you want to say something. Is it okay to bring you in just now? Sorry, Councillor Graziano.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Hi, I just want to say I'm really excited that the council is going with this EcoFlex, and thank you to Georgina Chapman, because I know I whinge like anybody's business, but I think this is a really good opportunity to sell this to people on low incomes. I work in Luton and I work in a large charity, and we've benefited for about 25 people that have used up this scheme where they get a free boiler. It's on strict criteria, it's non-condensing, da-di-da, or there's two routes, low income or you're on benefits. And I really do think it's a really good thing that we could sell. So I just wanted to acknowledge Georgina. Thank you for working hard and getting this running, because I know other councils are doing this and it felt that it was unfair that we weren't doing this. We're back up there. So, you know, you know, if you need any support, help, please let me know. But it's a great thing to be doing for people on low incomes, especially those that need boilers, and boilers are coming to the end of their lifespan in some property. So just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jay. Much appreciated. And Georgina works incredibly hard. All the team work incredibly hard, doing great work, really, really well. And it's how we're able to present things like this and find grants like we do, and have schemes and initiatives and everything just sort of carry on all the time, because it's always just on the go, doing what they do really, really well. Julian, did you just want to come in and respond to Joe? Sorry, I just jumped in on that without even thinking.
Thank you for the recognition. I was just going to say, while kind of policy sort of kicked off the conversations about it, it was James Lees, our climate project officer, that kind of did the bulk of sorting out the MOU and that kind of thing, obviously with colleagues from legal, with one of the apprentices from environmental health helped as well to get the web page running, and we've got support from MSU in terms of administrating the application. So it really has been a kind of real cross-team, cross-directorate effort. So just to acknowledge those as well, but thank you.
Georgina, can I just bring in the regarding dear Linda's point about batteries and the outlet points? Is this a situation where it works because it works in the way which you described because you need more equipment, or what is it different that's being provided regarding the solar panels and the system and the, oh gosh, name of the bit of equipment I now can't remember. The inverter, thank you so much.
Honestly,
is it
honestly, I don't know. I'm not a solar expert. We just kind of help to get the scheme up and running. But I can go back to iChooser with what dear Linda said about the plugs and the inverter not only allowing one plug, and forward on their response.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. And if it is, I mean, directly ask them, is it a case of you need some more equipment, or you need some specific equipment to be able to do what's suggested? Because I believe that with regards to the scheme, it's like it's a startup set, or is there options for something a bit more, a bit larger and a bit more powerful? You have to excuse me, it's been a very long day and I can't quite remember. I'm so sorry, I didn't hear a word of that. Did anyone else? Or is it just my signal that's gone funny? No one heard you, Georgina. I'm so sorry.
I just said will do.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Right, I'm just going to very quickly check that there isn't anybody else waiting. Very sorry, guys. I'm on my phone. I can't quite see whether there's hands up or not. There we are. Right, okay, we're all good. In that case, if Sian's ready. Is Sian ready?
Hello, yes. I think my
I'm on my phone, but I think our HCC server's down because my computer's completely not working. And no matter what I do, if I add it to mobile hotspot or anything, it's not connecting to the internet. So happy, I'll still give my presentation things, but I'll share the slides once I get service back basically, and I'll share them. So if any questions come up from that, I'm more than happy to answer them afterwards. So I'll just go through what I have. And
okay, well, if I introduce you then, so this is Sian Hall, the operations manager, flood risk and adaptation. Sorry, is presenting a. You know what? I've done a terrible job of that. I'm so sorry. So this is Sian Hall from HCC, talking about flooding and adaptations. Please go ahead.
Fantastic. I'd also like to introduce also if I've got Lynn Sini here, who's our Director of Sustainability as well. I believe she's on the call. There she is. So I'll go through my slides, and if there's any questions, once I send them out, I'm more than happy to answer them. Apologies again for not having that. So I'm just going to do an update on Hitchin, the flooding that we had back in September, and then a brief update on adaptation. So if anyone has any questions, just let me know, but I'll go through the slides first. So Hitchin flooding we experienced at the end of September 2024. What do we know so far? So the Ashbrook rain gauge recorded 47 millimeters of rainfall on the 22nd of September, 23 millimeters on the 23rd, and then a further 36 millimeters on the 26th of September. So a lot of rainfall over this full week period. The flood warning it was issued on the 27th of September and then removed on the 5th of October. The rainfall was very intense and prolonged. The small water courses which lead into the main river became overwhelmed, and all of the volume of water from that large catchment area found its way down to the main river, causing significant fluvial and surface water flooding. Obviously, that then led to flooding of homes, businesses, and infrastructure. So far, we have confirmed reporting that 20 properties flooded internally and a further 27 properties externally flooded as well. While on site and since then through the process, we've had engagement and communications with MP Alistair Stratham and also Councillor Ian Albert, who have supported the process to date. So what have we done so far? We had a drop-in session for residents where they could come and give us their thoughts and feelings and experiences around flood risk. We had a large map that they could tell us what happened and where the water was coming from. There were various walkovers with varying parties, so North Herts, the Environment Agency, ourselves, all got involved at various times. We had assessment of assets along the River Purwell. There's also been clearance work done in partnership with North Herts and the Environment Agency and the Internal Drainage Board as well along the River Purwell to make sure there's no obstructions. We've also commissioned the National Flood Forum to come in with and work with the community to create a working group. With the idea of this is that they will help the community to create a flood plan and then work with all the partners through what happened and then those potential mitigations. We had a debrief event with where we, as the lead local flood authority, attended along with the fire service, highways, North Herts was there, and our resilience forum to do a review of what happened throughout the flooding event and take away some actions to basically improve the process should it happen again. Anglian Water has just also conducted an assessment of all their assets, while also looking at residents to put in non-return valves in some of their manholes to reduce risk. Anglian Water also carried out garden cleaning up of some of the residents' gardens. So that's what's been going on over the last 3 months. One thing just to be aware of at this point is everyone who's been involved so far has so the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs is a policy lead for flood and coastal erosion management. They create national policies and then they're delivered by risk management authorities, of which Hertfordshire is the lead local flood authority are one. Hertfordshire as the highway authority is also another, Environment Agency, district and borough councils also a risk management authority, as well as the water companies, which for North Herts would be Anglian Water. So we all have various roles around flood risk. including the residents and then business owners who have a risk of taking steps to protect their property and maintaining their properties in ways to reduce flood risk as well. So just in terms of what are we doing now, so we currently are having monthly multi-agency meetings where Anglian Water, ourselves and North Herts are meeting. Those updates each month are put on the HCC website, which the link is on my slide, so I will send that round for anyone who wants to have a look at that. But if you go onto our flood page under flood investigations on the HCC website, it is under there under Hitchin updates. We're currently working with the National Flood Forum, so they're engaging with the community this month to start that process. We're also carrying out our Section 19 investigation, which is one of our statutory roles. So we're understanding what happened and why it happened, and then we'll be putting in to that report recommendations of what can be taken forward. The EA are carrying out initial assessment, so we're working together to both produce those assessments. And then Anglian Water has carried out several CCTV surveys of their network and some assessments, and identified areas of concern and actions to be taken forward. So in terms of next steps for the Hitchin flooding, the creation of the Flood Action Group will happen over the next year. That's how long the Flood Forum, the National Flood Forum, are commissioned to work with the community for. And the idea is that they'll be building resilience within the community, as well as supporting them create a group that then can liaise with the appropriate partners and basically work together with us to find mitigation measures. We'll be finishing up the Section 19 and the EA initial assessment, and depending on those recommendations, taking those actions forward. Working with obviously North Herts to continue supporting the community where we can. And then also readdressing any of the recommendations in the debrief that came out from the Hitchin flooding. And then the last thing is we're also working on national legislation, identifying throughout the flood risk management cycle what works and what doesn't, and where there maybe need to be changes at a policy level. So that is just a quick update on Hitchin. I'm happy to take questions on that afterwards. In terms of adaptation, so we're working with our partners, districts and water companies, as an example. We're doing this through the HCC SP, and I currently have just taken over the adaptation and water subgroups, where we in the leading up to now, we've been working with districts to create climate change risk assessment, and they're currently looking at how are we going to take that forward in those subgroups and with HCC SP. We as a county council have also just been involved in the adaptation reporting power, which we're a pilot authority where we report on adaptation and how we as a county have been mitigating against the risks of climate change and the impacts of climate change. We found that it's a very resource intensive process, but we have a lot of good lessons learned that have come out of it. It is a 5-year cycle, so we won't have to do it again for another 5 years. But I think it's really set us up to understand what we need to report on and what we will need in 5 years' time, so we can work on making that process as seamless and as easy as possible, to make sure we're also actioning the things we need to and producing good processes. So that's everything. Again, apologies that I don't have my slides. I will share them the minute I can get back online. But yeah, happy to take any questions, or if Lynn, you've got anything you want to add on to that before.
If I may, and good evening, councillors. Yeah, just to say the work that we're doing on national policy has really come at the request of the MP for Hitchin, Alistair Strathern, and what we're doing is looking at the rules and regs that are out there for the 4 or 5 risk management authorities and trying to find the holes between them. So we know that if there's a major incident, things work reasonably well. But what we found in Hitchin was some of the contacts that we wanted weren't immediately available. There was no one assigned, for example, to be the community liaison during the event. That responsibility doesn't fall to any of the risk management authorities. And there were other bits and pieces as well, which we think could be improved. And your officers and Ian are kindly, Councillor Albert are kindly working with us as a kind of example of a borough or district so that we can make our recommendations to MP Strathern, and he will then be able to pass them on to the work that's going on in Parliament. So we're very grateful to officers and to Councillor Albert for working with us on this, but hopefully we're going to come up with a standard operating procedure that we will all be able to agree works. So all the districts and boroughs and the Environment Agency and the local flood authority and the water companies, and then in Hertfordshire at least we'll have a system that works the best way it can whilst we wait for the legislation to catch up. Thanks.
Super, thank you so much. Flurry of hands went up and I managed to catch the order they went up in. So I'm going to go to the first question, which is Councillor Graziano.
Hi, thank you for that update. As I read the last environment update, which I read, there is a link on there for flooding resilience, which I've been publicising at my parish council meetings, which I thought is really good. Is there a deadline on that? Was the only query. It's important that we capture flooding, although it's not so much prevalent in Kings Walden, but Whitwell, where I think it flooded, we had a lot of hoo-ha and da-de-dahs. So I thought it was a really good thing with that link on there that I've shared. But is there a deadline on that, please?
In terms of did you say it was on the Environment Agency website?
No, it's on our North Herts Council environment update. There was a link from Hertfordshire County Council's resilience flooding, if you were affected by flooding, to do with a grant maybe potentially in the future.
So there's, in theory, there's no deadline. We will be in the new financial year, so from April onwards, we'll be looking at how many people signed up and then looking to work with the Environment Agency who fund that grant to basically apply for the money. So there's no deadline, but we will have to cut it off once we confirm. We need to start confirming money with the Environment Agency because we'll have to ask for a specific amount. So I'd get anyone who wants to express their interest in that. I'd do it sooner rather than later, but it'll be the end of March that we will probably stop that. But there's nothing to say residents can't still get in touch with us, and if we are able to add them onto the scheme, we will do.
Okay, thank you so much. Next up was Councillor Claire Strong.
Thank you, Amy. It's good to know, the update from Hitchin. However, you mentioned the flood alert page, so I went to have a look at that, and there's only 2 sites on there. One, obviously, I'm interested in, which would be Kimpton and Lily Bottom, because that's in the North Herts area, and I do remember when Kimpton flooded many years ago. So good to see that's monitoring. But in my own ward, when it rains terribly, we get flooding on a road. Okay, dwellings are not in danger, but there is a health risk. But where would I find that on a list? Because this is a flood risk. When it happens, there's dirty water going into ditches and that, and then getting in and contaminating the chalk stream there. So I'm
for me.
Sorry?
I think that one's for me, if I may. We're looking at the moment about how we deal with the issue of road runoff and chalk streams. There are technologies available, but we're dealing with a very elderly road system and the infrastructure that sits underneath it, which is dealing with considerably more water than it was designed for. So I can't promise you immediate action, but I can promise you that we're doing our best to get on top of it, and us and many other local authorities.
Do you have a list of all these? I mean, I just want to make sure that the one that I have to deal with and get, made lots and lots of concerns whenever the road's flooded. And it's not a little flood, it's a big flood. I mean, cars have to turn around and go another way because otherwise they won't get through it.
In that case, it's probably been reported, but there's a highways page on the fault reporting page on the HCC website, and Sian's right, these looks like our computers are down. So I can't get the link for you, and I'm also on
I'm sure it's been reported.
If it's been reported, then the best way.
But it's how does one get action and traction on it when you've got a bit of a standoff between Anglia Water and who's going to go and sort of go in and have a look at the drains, because a lot of it could just be that the drains need to be cleared out.
Okay. I would suggest, Councillor Strong, if you want to drop me a message, an email, I'll pick it up for you and I'll chase it through.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I'm taking your name now.
Go for it.
Super, thank you. Can I just double check, Joe, is that a legacy hand or have you got a further question?
I did have a further question, but I can
Oh,
wait.
yeah, I was going to
see
say, in
there's
that
other
case,
hands up there.
I'll take you back at the end because I didn't know if that was
Okay.
something else. Okay, next was Councillor Ian Albert.
Hello, thank you. Thanks, Amy. And obviously, probably for Claire, you should chase it through your county councillor. I can't remember who that is now, but you might want to do that. I mean, there's no question that no matter how much interim and remedial work could be done, there still would have been a flood with the amount of rain. But I think what we have identified, and that's probably a lesson to learn for other areas, is around that we've got some really good work going on with the Environment Agency, Anglian Water, North Herts Council, Herts County Council, and so on now, working together to do a whole raft of remedial work that hadn't necessarily been identified previously. And I think there's certainly some lessons to learn there in thinking of how we deal with other flood areas across the district and the county. But I think in that working together, I don't know whether Sean or Lynn could remind us. I think one of the other things that we wanted to do was to try and make sure we got a really good sort of, you know, Q&A kind of documents and things out there about questions people might ask and where they might then go to find out that information. I can't remember whether we've completed or we're still working on that now, but that communications part, it does seem to me to be one of the things that we can help as a council to improve, so residents do know where to go, because it is quite confusing, and that was certainly one of the things I think we had a lot of feedback about.
Yeah, so just coming on to that one, yeah, we are doing a lot of work around providing sort of education and resources for residents at the moment. So we're currently working on creating those in terms of roles and responsibilities. So we're hoping that will help a lot. But if any residents do come to any councillors and are struggling with information, please feel free to drop us a message. We're more than happy to create a Q&A on that, and because unless we know those questions being asked, unless directly to us, it's difficult to understand. So more than happy for people to send through questions that have come up, and we can create something that we know what the frequently asked questions are in that case as well.
Again, thank you again to your officers, because between ourselves, Public Health, Environment Agency and others, we were able to put together quite a good FAQ for people in Hitchin, and a lot of that will be relevant in other locations. So again, the multi-agency working there between the councils in particular went very well.
Super work, guys. Thank you so much. Next in line for questions is Councillor Tina Bartwas.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great to see Sean and Lynn here and just understand a bit more, and for our residents to understand about what has happened in Hitchin. I want to understand the challenges you face in relation to tackling flooding. So there's been a couple of things like remedial works and finding a contact point for liaison with the community. I'd like to understand why this was only discovered in relation to Hitchin and what the wider implications for our district might be. So just any learning that you've taken from this that could be applied to Kimpton and other places.
Ready to start, Sean?
Yeah, if you want to start, and I'll come in if I've got anything to add.
So in Hitchin, it was very useful that the residents got themselves self-organised very quickly post-event, set up their WhatsApp group, and Councillor Albert has done a fantastic job in kind of acting as the single point of contact for that residents group and bringing in other people as needed, other organisations as needed. What we know from previous flood events is that having the local flood groups is pretty critical, because once you get a flood alert, neighbours quite often can help each other, particularly where there's older residents, and that self-help can be incredibly useful. Also, when a community is putting its buildings back together or dealing with matters to make the buildings more resilient, they can work collectively. So maybe they can commission single builders, bulk buy, etc., etc. So the flood group that we're helping set up in Hitchin or supporting by the National Flood Forum will be able to hold that function. So what we will try and do as a lead local flood authority is where there are areas that are persistently flooding, we try to get these local flood groups set up. Obviously, we can't anticipate everywhere that's going to flood. If I could, I'd be a multimillionaire. So what we are encouraging districts and boroughs to do is to start looking at how comms would work in an area where flooding is happening. So if there are already networks, you as councillors in particular, you know who the leads are in communities, you know who's active. And quite often, I think it will be for us to go to the local council and say, who do we talk to? Who's most likely to be able to get a group together so we can work collectively? So I would say that's a key lesson learned.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up, I've got Councillor Bryony May.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for that presentation. It's extremely interesting. I just wonder whether you'd be able to say a bit more about the likelihood of flooding in Hitchin. So perhaps give a bit of context on when it was last flooded and how often it's been flooded in the past. And I'm also interested in the sort of range of properties that have been flooded, particularly in terms of age. So are these older properties that have been regularly flooded, or are there new properties that have never been flooded? Because I know how difficult it can be where you don't get flooding very often for people to remain aware if there's a long gap between one period of flooding and another.
Yeah, no, excellent question. So the last time that it flooded, so this is going on residents reporting at the drop-in, because we don't have any reports since the Lead Local Flood Authority was set up of any of that area of Walgrove Road ever flooding. Some people said from 1980 was the last time it flooded. Some people who were there in 1980 said it's never flooded. So I don't think it was a large event. If it was, because we've got different reports from different people at a drop-in event. But I think one thing that does show it is that the Environment Agency have never put a warning there before. They've never given out a warning for that area. So it's never, it's not an area known to us to flood. And I think that's one of the difficulties, as Lynn mentioned. If we don't know it's going to flood, we wouldn't be able to set anything up, because obviously there's so many areas across that would be at risk of flooding. So in that case, then most residents wouldn't be aware of past flooding because it hasn't happened previously. So yeah, that sometimes can be difficult with residents, but that's one of the things we're working on in terms of this educational resources, where we're not just focusing on people who have flooded before, it's focusing on everyone across the county to make them check their flood risk and be aware of the risk that they're at, whether they've flooded previously or not. In terms of how old the properties are, not sure in terms of that, so I'd have to look at that, and happy to get back to you about when they might have first been built, and then how long it's been since then. But yeah, in terms of that flooding, as far as we're aware, it hasn't flooded before, and maybe potentially in 1980 has there been a previous flood event, but we've got no information or records on that.
If I
I'll
may,
put a quick answer, Bryony, in the chat. Just sorry, Amy.
That's all right. So yeah, there's an extra answer in the chat if anyone wants to check on that.
May I chip in?
And
We've got three fundamental problems in that. We've got buildings that are on floodplains, and certainly the area that flooded we would define as that. And if we look at the older maps, you can actually see where the overflow channel was underneath the houses which have flooded. We've got a job to do on making sure that people understand the Environment Agency flood maps that come out, because one resident told me very indignantly that they'd seen the flood map and the line only came halfway up their garden. So how come their house had flooded? So we have a job to do there explaining that. But we also have a job to get people to see the new flood maps, which the Environment Agency will be releasing somewhere towards the end of this month. And we're expecting to see additional properties moved into flood risk zones. So with that comes a fear, I think, about insurance. Insurance, though, the companies are already using very sophisticated risk maps that we don't have access to, which should be already predicting this degree of risk. However, it's always possible that they'll see it as a reason to put the premiums up. But also for houses which are going through purchase at the moment, where suddenly it moves into a flood risk zone, we may well see some nervousness in that range, but hopefully there won't be too much of that. But if I could just make councillors aware of that, because those of you who've got flood risk areas on the maps, you may have some residents coming towards you, and we'll try and help again with frequently asked questions.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I had next on my list Councillor Caroline McDonald, but I can see you've put your hand down. Is that because your questions have been answered, or?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I was just going to follow on from Councillor Strong's point. We too have a issue with rainwater that doesn't seem to want to go anywhere, and we've literally had a puddle which is half on a road and half on the pavement for a year. It's been there for a year. We've had Affinity Water out thinking there's a water leak. We've had council out. We've had it all re-tarmacked, and it's just been a nightmare. And the puddle is back. It's been reported. The drains have been reported. It's gone from Affinity to county to somewhere else, and it just seems to go round and round in a circle.
The mystery of the persistent puddle.
Well, we call it it's on Gravely Road, and we call it the Great Gravely Lake now. It's, just a thing that's there.
Turn it into a tourist attraction. There you go. The never disappearing puddle. Make some money from it. I'm so sorry. Sian, Lynn, would you like to come?
I regret that you are going to unfortunately see more of this, because as we get more rain, the infrastructure wasn't built for this amount of rainfall, and that's climate change, I'm afraid, that we're dealing with. Over Christmas, we were so lucky. If that storm event had been 50, 60 miles further south, the pictures on the television would have been of us, not of the areas in the Midlands that we saw. So I think we've got to be very clear to prioritise the resources that all of us have, to make sure that we are actually dealing with the issues where there is the most regular damage to people's property or means of earning a living. And I think collectively, as elected members at the county level and at local level, we will benefit from advice from you as to where the greatest impacts are, because we do get a lot of reports. We can look at the number of reports that come through, but not everybody does report. So when we're triaging, because we have to, unfortunately, there just isn't enough money in the system to help everybody. When we're triaging, and then when our input into the various funds is then triaged against other areas, it tends to be the areas that have got the most properties affected and that are affected for the longest, where the money comes through the system. In terms of roads, and that will be very similar. Where is the majority, where are the impacts that affect the most people, or where people are significantly affected by their only means of access or egress being blocked? So we do have to prioritise, and it's quite painful. But again, as elected members, I think you can help with this, because where there really are persistent ongoing problems that are affecting multiple people in a community, highlighting that will really help us. And then we can make sure we get the resources to where they'll have the most impact.
I think we're very
How
lucky
do
this
we
doesn't
report that
affect-
on the... Sorry.
Flood
go on.
reports would come into either myself or Sian. Highways reports would go into the fault reporting system for highways on the website.
So is there a particular, so I understand obviously there's the fault reporting page and there's Fix My Street and everything like that, but is there a, I'm presuming for up until a certain point, there wasn't necessarily a report of fault of a persistent puddle. So is that maybe going to, if you're looking for maybe particular things like that and that occurring in the county, so do we report it as such? So I'm being very
if you think
about
it's
this.
what I would suggest is, if you think it's a significant issue and it's affecting a lot of people detrimentally, then get it onto the highways website at the county council. If it's on a road or a footpath, a paved footpath, get it on there. If it's relating to properties, Sian, where would you like them sent if it relates to properties?
So it still goes through the same route, except when you do the fault reports to highways, you just pick property flooding, and then my team goes through one by one and assesses them, basically, because not all property flooding comes through to us, and then we'll take that forward with a questionnaire where we write to the area.
Sorry,
thank you.
Just to continue on, so this puddle is not affecting houses. Very luckily, it's on quite low ground, so it doesn't affect any of the houses on Gravely Road. But it is, as I say, half on the road and sort of half on the field, I guess. So it is very dirty, disgusting water that's just sitting there. Yeah, so I don't know if that sort of needs to be reported in another route, that it's just dirty sitting. I mean, it's rainwater, right? So it's not sewage or anything like that, but
pop it in. I've just put the link on the chat, so that you can all have it. So pop it in. Everything gets looked at, but not everything is prioritized.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Everything is important, not necessarily everything is urgent. Yeah, that was something that crossed my mind when we were discussing it, actually, is like, if it's just a constant still water, is that going to maybe eventually become a health issue? But I suppose if it gets rained on and such, that will change out as well. But I'm probably getting far too deep into this. So I'm glad there is somewhere that can be reported to. I'm just mindful of...
I'll have a look.
Yes, I'm quite mindful of time, and I have got lined up Councillor Joe Graziano can come back in now, and then we've got Councillor McDebenham, and then I see oh, hang on a minute. Bear with me 1 second while I just quickly check whose hands are actually up. Then I've got Dear Linda, and then Georgina, your hand is up as well. Is that because of the next thing we're doing, or is that to bring a point in regarding this that we're discussing now?
No, it's just we had a few questions that were sent in advance from people that couldn't attend the meeting, and I just wanted to note that in case they're watching this later, we have got your questions. We can't answer them in the meeting because some of them require input from the Environment Agency or other teams, but we will respond to those people in writing.
Oh, okay, fantastic, thank you. Right, so I'm going to go to Councillor Graziano for his follow-up question.
Hi, thank you, Councillor Allen. Thank you, Sean and Lynn, for your presentation. It's just to carry on from what Councillor Strong was emphasising, Councillor McDonnell. Obviously, in the rural areas, there are not many homes, but loads of fields and roads. However, when we have really bad weather, it's the councillor email address that becomes quite hot, and yeah, and it's all your fault. We cannot control what happens with the weather, as I tell residents. However, what frustrates me is that a drainage system out in rural Hertfordshire, especially on the Darley Road where you've got the old Fox, it floods. And when I do my litter pick, I take a picture of that drain. I log it on Highways because it's full of mud, and I'm told it's fine. That's the frustration, and the drains are still full of mud. And then when it rains and we've got the surface runoff from the fields, the chalk streams fill up, the roads flood, no one can pass. My frustration is that Highways see this, but nothing gets done. Although we live in a rural village, it's still important because it's a main arterial route into our village, into Hitchin and Luton. So what confidence do I have that that drain that is still full of mud is going to be looked at? Because I followed it up again with Herts, and forgive me, Ian Albert, Councillor Barnard is my Hertfordshire, but he's not in charge of Highways. There's a problem with Highways and a disconnect with dealing with issues. I know it's money based, but something's got to happen here, because the same drain is full of mud, and when it rains, it floods. And I think that's the issue. It's not connected. That was my point.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Lynn, Sean, would you be able to respond to that regarding drainage, or is that something that needs to be put to Highways themselves because of the drains?
I mean, it's a Highways question, Councillor, but I know if you multiply the number of reports that you're making here by 10, and you're not telling me about all the problems that are out there, there are multiples. And really what they're having to do is assess, right, how many people are affected, and those are the ones that they go for first. Now, where there are persistent problems, and as I said, it's the only access or egress from a village, they will try and get on top of that. But if it's a whole drain run that needs replacing, we will also have to sort out who owns the drain. So it isn't necessarily Highways in a rural area. Again, if it's a persistent issue, report it on the fault report. If you're not getting anywhere, we can, I think going through Councillor Barnard is a good idea, because although he's not the highways portfolio holder, he will push it for you. So I would go through your county councillor. I'm just an officer, but I don't have control over the highway side of things. And the input I put in will be considered alongside everybody else's. So I would suggest going through your county councillor.
Thank you, Lynn. There's no such term as just an officer, I'd like to add. Thank you. So persistent problems, please report. And it's always a little bit more complicated than it might seem, is what I'm hearing from that. Up next, I've got Mick Debenham and then Dear Linda, and that is the last of the questions I'm going to take because we are going to have to move on to the next item because we are now an hour into the meeting.
Right. Well, thanks again for coming. Really, really good. A couple of people have mentioned in passing Kimpton, and us as an authority are now monitoring groundwater levels there on a daily basis because we know it's close. It's over. The last time it was this high was in 2001, which was the last time it flooded. I wonder if you could enlighten everyone as to what preparatory actions you're taking, and is there any difference to defend against groundwater flooding as opposed to rivers bursting?
Yeah, if I come in and then Lynn can add into it. So we have weekly meetings with all our partners in a multi-agency meeting where we assess the flooding. Groundwater is different to surface water or river flooding. Surface water and river flooding can happen instantly in an hour with no warning whatsoever. Groundwater is different. We can monitor it, but it's also a lot more unpredictable. So in that, because it's happening underground, we can monitor it at where we have a sump, which is an area that we can monitor water and it enters, and we can see how close it is to the surface. But that's only for that one area. When you've got a whole catchment, it's really difficult to know what the groundwater is doing in the other areas. So until it comes either to the sump or to the surface, it's really difficult to predict. But what we're doing week on week is looking at the visual. So also North Herts provide us with photos and things, and when needed, we can go to site and those levels. And we're looking at the predicted rainfall over the next week and making assessments of whether we think it's be coming out of anywhere at that time. But again, it's really difficult to predict. Groundwater's slow moving. So where you would have an intense rainfall event and you see flooding straight away, it can take weeks before the rainfall event that happened 2 weeks ago. You see it through the groundwater because it's slow moving. So that's the difference between sort of the different sources of flooding, if that makes sense. We're working closely with the community to keep them updated. North Herts are leading on the comms for that. So, we go through it every week and making sure that we're working with the parish council as well to support residents where we can.
Brilliant, thank you.
No problem.
I was on mute. Right, so that was Mick, and then Dear Linda, I saw your hand was up and now it's gone down again. Did you have a question you wanted to ask, or or has it been answered?
It's been dealt with, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I actually have a question I wanted to ask about sort of runoff natural drainage that would normally occur through tree roots, but it's quite out of the way. So I think I'm probably just going to ask it a separate time. It's not necessarily related to this, but it's just something that occurred to me, and I just wanted to remember to ask that later on. I'm going to find my agenda. Okay, there we go. Right, Lynn, Sean, thank you so much for answering our questions there. We really appreciate it, and your presentation. I'm looking forward to seeing the slides when your the website and the system and everything is working again. I'm going to move over to the presentation from Ellie Hollingsworth and Georgina Chapman, who are the policy and strategy team for North Herts Council regarding climate adaptation corporate risk. So over to Georgina and Ellie, please.
Thank you. Ellie's gonna take you through this, which is an update on the new climate-related risk on our corporate risk register. So I will hand over to Ellie.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, so the adaptation risk on climate change. So as of November, a new risk covering climate change adaptation has been added to the Council's corporate risk management system. And it's been put on as a service risk. So the system enables the council to record, monitor and report performance indicators, improvement actions and risks. So this risk covers the idea that adaptation to climate change will remain an ongoing and consistent consideration as the climate continues to change. So although short-term failure to adapt services to this changing climate may have sort of low impacts for the organisation, the council, the failure to adapt over the longer term brings sort of bigger potential impacts that may need to be acted on. So the current assessment of the risk is 5. So it is a scale from 1 to 9, and 5 is medium, which means that the likelihood is medium and the impact is also medium. So that is the risk management framework for the scale of sort of numbers. So the risk identifies some opportunities and consequences to council services. So some opportunities include operations and services that are resilient to the impacts of climate change, added value of planned adaptations compared with the potential cost of inaction or having to implement immediate and sort of emergency responses, and also leading by example for businesses and other organisations in the district to also sort of look at their own sort of practices and see that how they can be better prepared. Some consequences with increased likelihood of business premises being out of action, for example, due to flooding, failing to fully deliver services and projects, potentially breaching some statutory duties, and also unbudgeted spend on emergency actions, sort of for disruptive incidents that appear that we haven't been prepared for. So some work completed on the risk sort of to date is the establishment of the Climate Officer Group and also the creation of the climate risk log for the council, which identifies potential service consequences and control measures that we can put in place to help sort of mitigate against those. And just to finish off, some ongoing work on the risk is further consideration of climate change impacts into the corporate resilience arrangements. So the resilience team and sort of all the things that they do for emergency planning, and also consideration of resources to respond to these emergency events like the one that we saw in Hitchin. And we also continue to consider the environmental implications for each committee report and key decision. And we are also working on the development of a new sustainability strategy to establish sort of agreed objectives and actions in relation to this risk, as well as other things sustainability related. So that is everything on the adaptation risk. The document that I've just sort of read from is available on the papers. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to ask, or we can follow up afterwards. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ellie. Are there any questions? Okay, if anyone thinks of anything further afterwards, because I know I end up doing that, do feel free to email in or ask any of us, and then we can pass it on. Okay, in that case, I'm going to move over to the public participation part of the evening and bring in Julia Sananda of Decarbonised Letchworth to provide a presentation on updating the Letchworth design principles. So Julia, are you ready there?
I am. Your IT man has my slides, I think. Has he got them?
Faith.
IT man. Are you ready?
Oh, look at this.
Oh,
It's gonna
super.
work.
There we go. Look at that.
Gosh, aren't we good?
This is exciting. Right, Julia, all yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, can people see it? Or yeah, it's all showing now. Okay, thanks for giving us a slot of this meeting. I'm part of a group called Decarbonise Letchworth, which sort of take over from Transition Town Letchworth that other people might have been familiar with in the past. We kind of still have an interest in transport and housing issues. What I want to talk to you about today is sort of the community aspirations for updating Letchworth design principles, and it does have relevance for council's SPGs as well. Last summer in June, the Heritage Foundation town meeting, residents were given a chance to write on post-it notes what their thoughts were on the design principles, and that was followed up by a further meeting in November. The ideas submitted haven't been shared back with the participants, so we don't know what was actually collected across the various tables of those events. And it's not very clear how these exercises will influence an update to the design principles. So as a group, we've initiated a project where interested homeowners in Letchworth can come together and provide an in-depth feedback on the changes they want to the design principles and to the town's planning process. And in the next few weeks, we'll be we'll have available a draft of some of the ideas we've got so far. Now, North Herts Council is a key stakeholder in the design principles, and we're really keen that the environmental panel uses its influence to help Letchworth design principles get upgraded to deliver the aspirations for homeowners to improve energy efficiency and carbon reduction. That's kind of why we've wanted to come along and talk tonight. Can I move to the next slide, please? Okay, so what we're looking for is updates that respect the heritage in the town, but also recognise that the housing stock has to evolve and adapt for fuel poverty, changing weather, energy security, resource depletion, and actually for healthiness of homes. I've just put a slide up there from taken in 2015 with the thermal camera that's in Letchworth Garden Shed now that people can use to look at their homes. And that shows the houses on Spring Road, where one house had the external insulation that was put in at that time and the other didn't. The house on the right looks a lot brighter, a lot more heat coming out. So we can realise, 10 years on from that picture, just how much energy savings gone on for those houses that have had the benefit of the external insulation. But unfortunately, not a lot has happened in external insulation since that time. It's all come to a halt. Can we pop on to the next slide? So in terms of the design principles for Letchworth, in 2000, there was a set of design principles issued by the Heritage Foundation, and those were adopted by North Herts councils. And in fact, they are still the current Letchworth supplementary planning guidance. They're still sitting there. But since then, in 2009, the Heritage Foundation updated the design principle to then introduce the idea of 3 character areas. By 2015, they reduced that to 2 character areas and also designated 1,700 homes to be of special interest. The town has about 433 listed buildings, so that's significantly more than actually is listed buildings. I suppose this to us throws up some questions it'd be lovely if someone's got the answers to tonight, which is why have the Letchworth Heritage Foundation and North Herts Council not agreed to adopt a common set of design principles since 2000? Is there a reason for that? And why have the council not updated the Letchworth SPG since 2000, 25 years ago? I mean, that's 2 questions it'd be lovely to know the answers to. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so we're keen that we update the design principle for today's world. And if you go to Bourneville up in Birmingham, where they also have a scheme of management, that they actually do seem to have had a really good dialogue with their residents, and their latest design guides actually contain some of the feedback from those sessions. And one of the things that came out was that the residents said that anything that improves the efficiency of homes should be encouraged, especially if it can be done subtly and in keeping with the feel of the area. Whole section in their design guide around the energy hierarchy, talking about energy conservation, energy efficiency and renewable energy. And you start to see moves in there on things like external insulation that we're just not seeing locally. So it really should be a fabric first approach, and going for external insulation and solar panels. There's lots of work going on solar panels, but what can we do about sorting out just the energy loss in the houses? And how good are the supplementary planning? How can we get the supplementary planning guides and the design principles in Letchworth to actually get movement on this. And the other thing is we've got all this new technologies around security installation, car chargers, heat pumps, air conditioning, storage batteries, with supplementary planning guidance that's 25 years old, 10 years old design principles. None of this is really covered, which makes it really difficult for the people in the town to know what they can and can't do, and and what they have to ask permission for. It's just because it's a barrier to change, not having clear instructions around these things. Can we pop on to the next slide? So updating in terms of external insulation, and I will show an interest here that I have a house that I would really like to get externally insulated, and I have started the process and are in appeals with the Heritage Foundations to try and get movement on these design principles. So I will declare an interest in this, but also an understanding of the process as having been involved in it. The older houses that were built with open fires had high numbers of air changes per hour due to the open chimneys, but they also lost lots of heat. So as central heating's come in, this natural ventilation's reduced and humidity levels have increased. Mix that with the solid walls, and actually what you get is mould. And the picture you've got there is actually one I've taken of the mould. You move the furniture, even if you've had some air gaps behind it, and you are constantly fighting mould in these houses. So it's okay having Awaab's law, but if we can't fix the houses, we have to live in these unhealthy houses now. And we're not going to go back to open fires. If we're trying to go to a low carbon way forward, we have to find a way forward for these houses. We know well executed wall insulation reduces the risk of mould and health issues, improves comfort, reduces energy costs and CO2 emissions. We know external insulation has benefits over internal insulation. It's less disruptive to the householders, doesn't impact room sizes or internal features like doors and staircases, avoids the risk of a temperature crossing the dew point, which can result in condensation, damaging the building fabric, the joists, the floorboards, rafters. And it allows the thermal mass of the walls to retain summertime temperatures. So you don't need to put in air conditioners because it just actually gives you a nice environment in the summer as well. Next slide. So private households and social housing providers have found it problematic to progress external insulation applications. Last time I looked at the list, there's two applications from Settle that have just been sitting there for, well, probably a year now, going nowhere. And this has been going on really since 2015 when the Spring Road houses were done. We're not finding a way forward. And we've also found a reluctance from the Heritage Foundation for the odd house that has had external insulation. They don't share any learning from that on how we might succeed or what's acceptable. It's all very hush-hush and hard to find out just how many houses have actually had anything done. It doesn't appear to be very many. But the document what we've done is come forward with some ideas, and I'm not going to go through what's on the table on the right, but what we've got and be able to share hopefully in February is a document where we've said actually you could have a set of design principles that have sort of first go at some design principles that could move us forward, and hopefully these slides can be shared round with interested people on this panel to actually get a flavour of what we're recommending here. So we've taken the heritage documents, the modern and the heritage area, merged them actually into one set of design principles because there's so much overlap, and actually put some new ideas of how to move forward on the stuff that really matters in terms of reducing our carbon footprint and tackling health issues and fuel poverty. Can you pop to the next slide? Okay, I've put this slide in because you think, well, shouldn't we just live in the heritage? And that's, we chose to live in Letchworth. But I've actually been looking at the planning inspectorate's appeals. And this is an interesting one from a conservation area in Harrow, built similar period to quite a lot of Letchworth property, 1915 to 1950 in this cul-de-sac. If you look at the picture, the house in white is externally insulated. It's part of a semi, would have looked like the one next to it. When that went to the planning inspectorate, it was actually determined that the house was actually fitted in with the conservation area, and actually they didn't even need to go to the energy examples to actually approve the appeal and allow the planning permission. So I think if we begin to look at case studies we realise it's time to actually start to make some movement and get some clear understanding of what should and shouldn't be acceptable. And that actually, if the house remains in character, is what this is saying, then actually external insulation works. And I mean, that's more radical than is being refused in Letchworth. Can we move to the next slide, please? And the other thing I sort of wanted to bring up was solar panels. If you look at Marley, who often in Letchworth, we're encouraged to, well, we are required to put Marley clay tiles on our roof. Marley now actually have a solar tile that actually does inset, you know, a dark inset solar array. And so our kind of feeling is it's time now to actually allow solar tiles. You know, have them on the south, southwest, southeasterly roof. Fine if that's at the back and out of sight, then that should be where it goes in preference. But actually, for those houses that cannot, you know, those people that cannot benefit from all these lovely schemes you're doing at the moment, we feel it's time to actually start to think about, well, actually, let's relax some of these rules. Let's get consistency between what's allowed in modern area and heritage area. And again, you can take this away and read our thoughts on what the design principle should look like. Can we move to the next slide, please? So really, I want to share, in summary, what I've shared tonight is there's an urgent need to address the mismatch between the national NHC policies of reducing fuel poverty, tackling climate change, tackling unhealthy mould in homes and improving energy security, and the failure to encourage the necessary retrofit of homes in both the Heritage Foundation design principles and the North H Council Letchworth SPG. We would like the environmental team to champion the design principle changes that will improve energy efficiency, energy security and healthiness of Letchworth housing stock. We'd like to see an update to the NHC planning guidance so it enables well-designed energy efficiency retrofits and the adoption of new low-carbon technologies in conservation areas. And we'd like to, you know, to consider the draft, when we've issued it, the draft decarbonised Letchworth design principles as a basis for an updated Letchworth supplementary planning guidance. And just looking and quoting, just one final thing, when you read the area about the conservation area for Letchworth, and I presume similar wordings in all the conservation areas across North Herts, the areas are supposed to remain alive, prosperous, while ensuring the quality of the environment and individual buildings is not sacrificed for short-term gains. But the expectation is that change is managed in these areas, not prevented. I think at the moment, the design principles and the Letchworth SPG aren't really allowing the change. They're not allowing the change to be meant to managed. They're preventing it. So I kind of like to just raise this issue and see if we can get some actions to actually take some of the points I've made forward. Many thanks for letting us present tonight and share these thoughts.
Thank you, Julia. I'm just going to wait until, there we are, we're all back. Thank you so much for that. I've too have been to many a heritage meeting where we've written things on post-it notes and given our ideas and made our points and had these discussions and such. And one of the things I continuously point out to the heritage and have done, and I think they're starting to take notice of when everyone does say, is that you can't be progressive without progressing, and making those changes for future is the way forward with that. I'm just going to, so I'm assuming I can see all our officers have been taking notes and such. I'm just going to see if we've got any questions for Julia or any questions overall that we can discuss regarding that presentation. Joe, I see your hand is up.
Hello, Julia. Thank you for that presentation. I haven't met you before, but I'm fascinated about insulation, solar farm, and I just wanted to press on this matter that I think you've alluded to, that external insulation going forward about being progressive is false. Because if we all had solar panels on our roofs producing cheap or non-cost electricity, we wouldn't need to insulate our homes because the electricity would be free. Do you get my point? And this is what one of the contractors explained to me when I'm trying to get my 75-year-old mum insulated at home in Watford. He said, well, you could buy a solar panel for your property, pay it back in 5 years. Why would you need to insulate your home if the electricity is going to be for free? So I think moving forward, this is where we need to be. And all this retrofit stuff in between, I think is just grinding the stone. Does that make sense? I think I can see this now going forward. Solar panels in every property, we wouldn't be bothering about insulating our homes because the electricity would be free. Am I wrong? I think that's a really valid point about moving this forward.
Can I come back on that?
I think that's, yeah, of course you can, Julia, go for it.
I would say you cannot produce enough electricity to actually do the heat pump for what would be needed to actually get the heat into these houses. It doesn't address the problem of the mold in the houses from the solid walls. So external insulation brings us more than just sort of cheaper heating. It actually makes the home healthier and it makes it work better. And actually, but if you try to solve it by producing more energy, you just have to have more and more electricity. You'll need it for cars, you'll need it for other things. We don't have an excess of energy, so we actually have to reduce our demand, and it's fabric first. I think if you look at the energy hierarchy, I think what you're going to is the renewable energy, which is the last bit of the hierarchy. We've got to actually do the fabric first bit for, before that. So I think that's not a good way of looking at the problem, that it is time to actually sort out the fabric of these buildings.
Can I say something?
Hang on 1 second.
That's Chris from my team.
Hi, yeah, sorry, yes, if you just want to come back on that, because I haven't got my thing up to see whose hands are up. Yes, so Chris, if you want to come in on there.
Work out the hand. I haven't had a chance to collect my thoughts, but if you believe in a bright green future, we are going to need an awful lot of electricity. If you believe in AI and data centers and so forth. There's also the intermittency of solar is a problem, which means batteries at best for every home, or whatever, if we follow that argument. And the other thing is that we will never get rid of some fossil in electricity generation. It will always be there. And what they are finding is that the more renewables we add to the grid, the more volatile the grid is becoming. In other words, the difference between peaks and troughs is getting more extreme. So therefore, fabric first has a lot of soundness to it.
Thank you so much. So using less, reduction of the production and everything. Dear Linda, you had your hand up?
Yes, so I just wanted to share of my own experience because I don't know how big your mother's house is, in terms of roof area is, but I've got 25 solar panels on the roof of my house, both facing east and facing west. We've got 3 batteries in the garage, and in the summer we produce more than enough that we are able to feed the grid, but in the winter I don't. And I don't know how big your mother's roof is. She would never be able to heat the house, I would have thought, even with an air source heat pump in the winter on just the solar panels in the roof. So if somebody is saying, don't insulate the house, just put solar panels, I think they try to exploit you. I would always put solar panels. I have put solar panels in my house. I do defend solar panels. I think they're a brilliant idea, but they are not the entire solution. And if you can reduce the energy use demand by the house by improving the fabric, that is a valuable start, because it then a smaller array of solar panels, however small your roof is, would be sufficient or more likely to be adequate for the needs of the house once it's been insulated than if it hasn't been insulated at all.
Thank you, dear Linda. I think it gives to the argument as well that doing things like insulation means you are less dependent on the amount of energy you actually need, as well as all the other positive elements of doing it. So I understand the point about, well, the electricity is free, so we don't really have to worry about it. But using less, doing less, having less, ultimately, is the ideal way forward, because when it's just too much, it's just too much, and that's what's the problem that we've got to have with the planet right now. And I'm going to stop wittering and see whose other hands up. So Georgina, your hand is up.
Yeah, it was just to say thank you to Julia and Decarbonise Letchworth for the presentation. I've made some notes. There's some stuff I need to speak to our planning team about, and also we do have contact with the sustainability officer at the Letchworth Heritage Foundation, so we can talk to them as well. And I think this might be a good action to add to the panel's action tracker. But I'll discuss the exact kind of wording of the action with Councillor Allen and Councillor Debenham offline as per the process. But yes, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Georgina. And thank you, Julia, for your presentation. It was fantastic. And lots of food for thought there as well for us to take back to the heritage. Councillor Claire Strong, your hand is up. Do you have a question?
Well, not really just a question. I was just going to say, my experience again from North Hertfordshire Homes when they took over the housing stock and inherited I think it was 1,600 defective dwellings. One of the things they did is for the properties, they double skinned them, which is not putting it on is doing on the outside, just so that they could get those insulation and meet the criteria they needed to. And some of the houses they did knock down and rebuild, because that was sometimes is a better way to get your housing stock up to scratch. But on the other things you were talking about talking to the planning department, and I do sit on the project board for the strategic sites. And one of the things that we did receive was a paper on the design code, and that hasn't been updated till 2011, and the officers have started to work on it. It's a huge piece of work, and that will direct developers when they're coming in, and it's more to try and tie in as we start getting the large strategic sites coming in, but it's actually looking at the actual whole part of a new development from structure and design. But in that, obviously, would have to be, as part of that planning guidance that we're going to be giving, is actually knowing how the properties should sit and what we would like all those new dwellings that we have in terms of how they're going to be fit for the next sort of 20, 30 years. And to the gentleman who made the comments about electricity and generating it, I don't think we've even thought about how much electricity we need to be generating if everybody was driving an electric car.
Of course, you're absolutely right, Councillor Strong. I hadn't considered that with regards to heat loss and heat retention. Social housing especially, they have to reach a certain grade. And if they aren't at a certain grade regarding heat retention or their heat loss, then they ultimately can't actually be used and let out. So yes, you're absolutely right. That's why we've got areas like High Overway and Campfield Avenue that are going to be moved over to a development of more suitable housing and varied housing, because the heat retention in those chalets is so incredibly poor. So you're absolutely right there, and I hadn't considered that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, I was going to say, those are always going to be the difficult properties, and the only solution is you have to knock down and rebuild, because you're never going to get them to the standard, which I think, and of course the other thing you have to look at is that the standards obviously for building social housing are a lot higher than domestic housing.
Indeed, thank you. I can see everything's jumped around again. So Chris Jones had his hand up. If you're
I'm sorry I haven't
there we go, thank you,
proposed anything for this, but the issue I think is likely to be the streets with the electricity. There is a report that we came very close to serious problems with the grid on the day when it was -6, cloudy and windless, and that we depended on an interconnector being restored that was under maintenance to get through it. So there's grid aspects, there's streets aspects, and I don't think that it's going to be a composition of all solutions, whether it's fabric to reduce the heat losses, improve the health and well-being, along with PV, maybe heat pumps and EVs. Again, just as colleagues said, there is another huge issue. I do see this becoming something of a crisis in 5 years' time. There's also a Danish report, which I've really tried to get more information on. But you have to remember that the country has a carbon budget projected out to 2050 for the net zero policy, which entails reducing the amount of carbon that we're actually emitting. Now, that in turn, in time, is going to affect the amount of construction activity. So we've got to think about that as well. I see this being a terrific squeeze, and the more progress we can make now, the better. Thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you. I was about to say I'm mindful of time, but if I could just double check our participants now. We're supposed to be having Diane Ketcher join us to discuss an item, but not necessarily give a presentation, but I can see she's not actually here. So with that case, I shall carry on with some questions. So dear Linda, you've got your hand up again. So I go back to you with your question. And then since it's 9 o'clock, we'll soon consider wrapping up.
Sorry, it's not so much a question, but just adding to the last contribution. That's where not just building well-insulated homes to replace bad stock, but also making sure that all the homes that are built have an adequate storage of energy in the homes, and homes. Sorry to go back to the to my first point this evening. Homes that once they've got an adequate supply of batteries, when they're built, are able to run when there is a shortage of power, which may not be just a power cut, but also when there is a problem with power supply, because the more storage you've got in the house, and if the houses were built so that they possibly were able to store enough energy to run for, say, 2 days, should there be no sunshine for 2 days or no wind for 2 days, and you always had the storage facility in your garage in the house, then going into the future, you could always top up the batteries, either when the energy was cheap or when the wind was blowing or whatever, knowing that if there were 2 days of rain or no sunshine, you could run the house on that electricity. So again, it's not just well-insulated homes. It's homes where the roof is where possibly designed to be 100% oriented in south or whatever, so that it's 100% covered in solar panels, and also with an adequate supply of batteries to enable people to store enough energy, say, for 2 days, if should it be needed. That would be a good plan for the future.
Okay, thank you, dear Linda. Julia, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back at the end. You know, we've gone off on all sorts of tangents, but at the end of the day, I think Letchworth has 30% social housing stock. A lot of that is period stock. And since 2015 in the Spring Road sort of development, trials of external insulation. Sorry, my clock's going now. We've seen constant, we've seen various different companies coming in trying to work a solution with the Heritage Foundation, and 10 years on, we are still having found no solution. These people don't have lots of spare cash. It's eking out in heating, or they're living in cold houses. I really would ask the council to try and get the Heritage Foundation to move forward and find the solutions, because if the planning inspectorate says this is possible in conservation areas now, how are we going to actually move this forward? It's not that new homes are only a small proportion of our housing stock. The people that cannot take advantage of any of the things you do on solar panels or any of these other things are stuck in these houses because of design principles and planning guidance. So I really do urge, to think about the people in those houses and the cost of their heating this year, and see if we can actually move this forward for Letchworth. I just want to leave that final message. I know we've been on off other tangents, but it really feels time to get some movement on the design principles in Letchworth. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Just gonna double check. Okay, right. I've just had confirmation that Diane is not actually able to join us tonight. So what I'm going to do is round up our discussion, because we have actually now reached the end of the meeting, and just bring up my thing. Okay, fantastic. Right, well, in that case, unless there's anything else from my officers to bring in, because I can't bring up my chat right now. So no, all shakes of heads and such like that. Okay. Okay, I'd like to thank everybody who has attended tonight. I'd like to thank all the councillors who have been here as part of your role and participated. Really appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone who has presented tonight. Sian and Lynn, really appreciate what you brought with us and looking forward to seeing the slides. But it was a really good conversation about some really important things. And I think we got a lot, we definitely got a lot out of it. And I'd like to thank my officers for all the work that you've put in, and everyone for making tonight happen and for running it the way you do, and all the work that you put in. It was always appreciated so much. The next meeting is going to be on the 2nd of April. And if there's nothing else, I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you all tomorrow.
Bye. Super. Right.